They say grief hits you in waves. But for me, it came in silence. No sobbing, no screaming. Just this strange, hollow quiet as I stood beside the freshly dug earth, my black coat flapping in the wind like it didn't belong on me. She was a kind woman, someone whispered behind me. She was my mother. Or so I thought. The cemetery was cold that morning, not weather-wise, just emotionally barren. People came out of obligation. They gave soft condolences, avoided eye contact, and left early. No grand eulogies. No slideshow of memories. Just a wooden box, slowly lowered, and a pastor who hadn't even known her real name. That night, I came home to her house, my house now, technically. But it didn't feel like it. The air still smelled like her lavender lotion and chamomile tea. I walked into her bedroom, the one I'd never been allowed to enter freely as a kid, and opened the top drawer of her nightstand. That's where I found it. A black leather-bound journal. Cracked edges, stiff spine. Tucked beneath a pair of reading glasses and a faded photo of us at the zoo, me on her shoulders, her smiling like everything in the world was exactly where it should be. The journal had my name on a note stuck to the front. For Daniel. Read when I'm gone. No sooner. I hesitated. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened the first page. If you're reading this, Daniel, I'm no longer alive. And what I'm about to tell you will change everything you thought you knew about who you are and who I was. I sat down. The next line hit me like a punch to the chest. I am not your biological mother. I read it again. Not your biological mother. What? The air in the room seemed to thin. My ears rang. She wasn't my mother? My first instinct was denial. Some metaphorical nonsense. But the next pages? They weren't poetic. They were brutally, methodically honest. My mother, the woman who raised me, sang me lullabies, patched my knees, and cried at my graduation, had been hiding something. Something enormous. You were born in 1990 in a hospital outside Savannah, Georgia. Your birth mother's name was Eleanor Reese. She was 17. Your father. I don't know his full story. Only that he left before you were born. Savannah? We'd lived in Ohio my whole life. I met Eleanor through a shelter program I used to volunteer at when I was a nurse. She was scared, alone, and barely eating. She asked me to help her find someone to raise her child. She didn't want to give you up, not entirely. But she knew she couldn't raise you. The journal went on. Story after story. Details about how she brought me home, the legal battle to gain custody, the day I first called her mama. I never wanted to lie to you, Daniel. I wanted to protect you. From the world, from rejection, from the feeling of being unwanted. But most of all, from the truth, that sometimes love comes from choices, not from blood. I couldn't breathe. I closed the journal, clutching it against my chest like it might anchor me to reality. My memories, my childhood, they were real. But they weren't the whole story. I wasn't who I thought I was. And if Eleanor Reese was out there, I needed to find her. Not because I wanted a new mother, but because I needed to know why she gave me away. And why the woman who raised me, the only mother I'd ever known, never told me the truth. The next morning, I called out of work. Said I had a family emergency, which wasn't a lie. My entire family history had just been rewritten overnight. I sat at my kitchen table, the journal open beside my laptop, searching for a woman I'd never met. Eleanor Reese. The name alone sounded ghostly. No recent social media. Nothing current on Google. But then I stumbled onto something, an archived news article from 2009. Local nurse wins recognition for volunteer work with single mothers. The photo was small and grainy, but I recognized her instantly. My mother. Or the woman I used to think was. She was standing next to a young girl with tired eyes and messy hair, 17 at most, clutching a newborn wrapped in a blue blanket. My blanket. The caption read, Margaret Holloway, L., pictured with young mother Eleanor Reese and her infant son Daniel. So it was real. All of it. I zoomed in on Eleanor's face. She looked like someone who had once smiled easily, but hadn't in a while. Her expression was soft, but haunted. There was something in her eyes, something I recognized now in my own reflection. I followed the article trail to a local shelter's newsletter from that same year. It mentioned Eleanor being relocated through a protective program. That was the last digital footprint. After that, silence. I needed more. So I packed a bag, booked a rental car, and drove south toward Savannah. 12 hours alone in a car with my thoughts. The journal sat on the passenger seat like a ticking bomb. I didn't open it again until I pulled into a tired motel off the highway, the kind with flickering neon and stale coffee. I flipped to the next marked page. If you're searching for Eleanor, know this. She didn't run. She was told to disappear. There were people who didn't want her to keep you. People who had power. People who said things like, "You'll ruin that boy's life," and "You're just a scared little girl." What kind of people? She trusted someone she shouldn't have. A man in a suit with legal papers and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He said he'd find a family. Said it was better this way. But then she found out he never filed the adoption papers. He sold babies, Daniel. You were supposed to be part of his transaction. My blood ran cold. I didn't know until after I brought you home. But by then, Eleanor had vanished. She left me one letter. Just one. She said, "If you ever tell him I loved him first. Tell him I didn't walk away. I was pushed." I stared at the words for a long time. Sold? Was I trafficked and rescued? Was the woman I called Mom more of a savior than a thief? Was Eleanor a victim, or something else entirely? I couldn't sleep. I lay on that lumpy motel bed listening to the hum of the ice machine outside and wondering what kind of story I was about to unravel. The next day, I visited the old shelter from the article. It was now a low-income women's clinic. I showed them the photo from the article, asked if anyone remembered Eleanor. "Reese," the receptionist said slowly. "Eleanor Reese?" She disappeared into a back room and returned with a much older woman, probably in her 70s, with silver hair pulled into a tight bun and eyes that had seen more than they'd ever say. "You're Margaret's boy," she said softly, studying me. I'd know those eyes anywhere. I didn't correct her. I couldn't. "Do you know where Eleanor is?" She sighed. "You sure you want to find her?" "I need to." The woman nodded and reached into her purse. She pulled out a worn address book. She moved to North Carolina, changed her name. Been off the grid since 2010. But I hear she still checks in with Sister Grace down at the St. Mary's Clinic in Asheville. She tore off a page with a scribbled name and address. "Tell her June sent you. And tell her," she paused, eyes wet, "tell her he's grown up fine." I didn't ask how she knew that. I had a feeling Eleanor never stopped asking about me. I folded the paper carefully. And just like that, the next chapter of my life, the real chapter, was waiting 3 states away. The drive to Asheville was quieter than the one to Savannah. Not because the road was emptier, it wasn't, but because I didn't have room in my mind for noise. Just one name echoing on repeat like an unfinished prayer. Eleanor. I got to the clinic around mid-afternoon. It was tucked in the hills like it didn't want to be found. Small brick building, ivy on the windows, a worn wooden sign that read St. Mary's. Humble, unassuming. But when I stepped through the door, I felt something shift in the air. Like I'd walked into a sacred place built on second chances. "Can I help you?" a woman asked, her voice gentle. I gave her the note. "I'm looking for Sister Grace." She read it, her eyes flickering. "Wait here." 10 minutes passed. Then 20. I almost left. But finally, a woman in a gray cardigan stepped out from a side door. Her face was stern, but not unkind. Her presence filled the room like old cathedral light. "You're Daniel." It wasn't a question. I nodded. "I'm looking for Eleanor Reese." She studied me, long and slow. "What you're looking for is more than a person, son. You sure you're ready for that?" I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. She led me through a narrow hallway, down a flight of stairs, and out a back door into a garden. A woman sat there in a green sweater, back turned, watching birds pick at a feeder. She looked small, fragile, but something about her posture told a different story, like she'd weathered hurricanes and stayed standing. "Eleanor," Grace said quietly. The woman turned. Her face was older than the photo, of course it was, but those eyes hadn't changed. Not the color, not the shape, not the way they widened when they landed on me. I didn't know what I expected. Tears, maybe. A gasp. Some dramatic embrace. But she just whispered, "I knew this day would come." I sat down beside her. The garden was quiet. Just the rustle of leaves and a distant wind chime. "I found the journal," I said. She nodded. "I'm sorry it took me so long," I added. She looked at me. Really looked. "No. I'm sorry it took me this long." We didn't speak for a while. The silence between us wasn't empty, it was full. Heavy with questions I didn't know how to ask and answers she wasn't sure how to give. "I tried to keep you," she finally said. "I really did. I believe you." I was 17. No money. No family. Just fear. And this tiny, perfect baby that smelled like hope. Her voice trembled. And then that man came. I didn't push. I let her talk. He said he could place you with a family. Said you'd have a yard. A dog. A swing set. He made me sign papers I didn't understand. I thought I'd still be allowed to see you. She swallowed hard. But then I found out it was a sale. He was getting paid. By who? Couples. Rich ones. Desperate ones. I was just one girl in a line of broken promises. She looked down at her hands. I ran. I thought if I made noise, they'd take you back. Or worse, put you into a system. But then I heard you were with Margaret. And she loved you. She did, I said, and my voice cracked. She called me once. Years later. Left a message. Said you were doing fine. Said you had your first crush and hated broccoli. She gave a soft, broken laugh. She didn't say where you were. Just that you were happy. Why didn't you ever come back? I didn't want to ruin what she gave you. I didn't want to confuse you. You had a life. I was the scar that healed ugly. I sat with that. Felt it sink deep. I'm not here to blame you, I said after a while. I just needed to know. Eleanor turned to me. Her eyes were wet but steady. Do you want to know who your father is? That question hit harder than I expected. I hadn't even thought of him. Not really. Do you? I hesitated. Maybe. But later. She nodded. We sat together until the light shifted and the birds stopped singing. Then she said, there's something else you need to know. About Margaret. About what she did after she took you. I turned toward her, pulse quickening. She didn't just raise you. She hid you. What do you mean? She kept you off the books. No social security number until you were 10. She homeschooled you. Changed your last name twice. Because she was running too. Not just from the man who sold you. From someone else. I froze. Who? She never said. But I think she was protecting you from more than a corrupt system. I think someone else wanted you gone. After I left Eleanor that evening, I drove aimlessly through Asheville, headlights sweeping over quiet hills and empty streets, like I was searching for something that could never quite stay in focus. Someone else wanted you gone. Her words stuck to the inside of my skull like gum on concrete. Someone, not just fate, not poverty, not youth, but someone specific had looked at me, a baby, and decided I was better erased. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay on the motel mattress staring at the ceiling fan spinning in slow, hypnotic circles. Every face from my childhood paraded through my mind, neighbors, teachers, my mother's friends. Who had known? Who had helped? And who had threatened her? By morning, I was back in that garden with Eleanor, coffee in hand, hands colder than the ceramic muck. You said she was running, I said. Eleanor nodded slowly. From someone who called himself a lawyer. But he didn't act like one. Name. I never got a real one. Margaret called him Mr. Gray. Said it wasn't his name, just the color of his suits and the way he made her feel. Like fog. That didn't give me much. But it gave me a place to start. Back at the clinic, Sister Grace helped me dig through some old donation records. There it was, in brittle paperwork from 1991, a wire transfer from GV Holdings with a signed authorization by A.G. Grayston. Gray. I stared at the signature like it might blink back. I spent the next 3 days tracing that name through every public business filing and legal archive I could access. Most roads dead-ended fast, but one led me to a real estate trust in South Carolina, and through that trust to an address. I didn't tell Eleanor. Not yet. The place was a private office suite on the top floor of a corporate building in Charleston. Nothing on the door, no plaque, no logo. Just a security keypad and a faint whiff of old cologne lingering in the hallway. I waited outside for 2 hours until a courier came out with an unmarked package. I held the door open like I belonged, then slipped inside. The office was sterile, impersonal, but tucked behind a glass wall was a desk covered in old file boxes. Hundreds of them, all labeled with dates, some going back to the 1980s. I wasn't alone long. A voice, deep, slow, smoothie called out behind me. You're either lost or trespassing. Either way, you don't belong here. I turned. He was tall, maybe late 60s, white hair slicked back, and wearing, of course, a slate gray suit. Eyes like wet cement. Voice like a politician's funeral. Mr. Grayston? I asked. He smirked. I haven't gone by that name in years. I'm Daniel. That made him pause. Not long, but enough. Margaret's boy. He said it like a warning, not a greeting. I know what you did, I said. The babies. The shelter girls. You sold them. I placed children, he said smoothly, walking toward a minibar in the corner. You think the world takes care of them? I did what no one else had the stomach to. He poured himself a drink. Offered me nothing. Margaret took me, I said. And you chased her? No, he said. I chased the money she stole. What money? He sipped. She didn't tell you? I shook my head. She didn't just steal you. She stole the payment a couple in New Jersey made. 50,000, wired through a back channel. You were supposed to be theirs. White, healthy, blue-eyed. Very marketable. My stomach turned. She took the cash and vanished. Smart, really. Moved 3 states over, changed her name, disappeared into the system like a ghost. I clenched my fists. You tried to find us. He smiled faintly. Briefly. But a woman on the run with a newborn? They're like smoke. And honestly, he shrugged. Wasn't worth the trouble. I took a step closer. Do you know who my father is? That made him blink. No. But I know who paid for you. I stared. He reached into a drawer and tossed an old file onto the desk. The name on the cover stopped me cold. The DeMarcos. I knew that name. Everyone in my hometown did. Big charity donors. Owned the lumber mill that basically fed half the town. I opened the file. There were photos. A couple in suits standing outside a hospital. A note in a woman's handwriting. We'll call him Benjamin. You were meant to be their clean start, Grayston said behind me. Their marriage was falling apart. A baby would fix it. Did they know Eleanor didn't consent? They didn't ask, he said. I didn't tell. I couldn't stay there another minute. I left the office with the file clenched in my fist and nausea building in my throat. Outside, the sun was too bright. The street too loud. I drove back to Asheville like I was trying to outrun my own DNA. When I got to the clinic, Eleanor was waiting on the bench in the garden, her face pale, eyes wide. You went looking, didn't you? I handed her the file. Her fingers trembled as she flipped through it. When she reached the name, her breath caught. DeMarco. You know them. She looked at me. Not them. But I knew of them. And then she said something that shattered the last illusion I had about my story. They tried to buy another baby before you. It felt like the air itself had changed when she said it. They tried to buy another baby before you. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My ears were ringing, the world narrowing into a thin tunnel of dread. Eleanor clutched the file tighter, her voice low and bitter. In 1988, they came to the shelter. Same lawyer. Same gray suit. I was only 15 then, volunteering part-time. They brought a donation check and left with a promise that if a certain kind of child became available, they'd be contacted first. A certain kind? I repeated, stomach twisting. Healthy. White. Male. No record of addiction in the mother's bloodline. They wanted a blank slate with pedigree potential. I sat down beside her. The bench felt colder now. Do you know what happened to the first baby? I asked. Eleanor shook her head. All I know is that a week after their visit, a girl named Lydia, barely 16, went missing. She was pregnant. For months along. No family. No trace of her ever since. The name Lydia felt like a stone dropping into deep water. No splash, just wait. Did anyone look for her? The shelter filed a report. But back then, missing pregnant girls weren't newsworthy. They were considered runaways. Troublemakers. I looked back down at the file. There was a receipt. Not for me, for someone else. A different code number. A wire transfer dated 2 years before my birth. They'd done this before. And they had a pattern. I made a decision right then. I had to find the DeMarcos. Not through lawyers. Not through public records. I had to go home. Back to Ohio. Back to where I grew up. Back to the town that had treated the DeMarcos like royalty and me like I was just another quiet kid with nothing special in his blood. I didn't tell Eleanor my plan. I just hugged her for the first time, and this time, it wasn't awkward or hesitant. It felt like something sacred had passed between us. Like truth. The drive to Ohio felt shorter than it had any right to be. Maybe because I didn't stop once. Not for gas, not for sleep. My body was running on adrenaline, fear, and a deep need to dig up the roots of my own story. The DeMarco estate sat on the edge of town, high gates, long drive, the kind of place where even the breeze moved differently. I parked across the street and just stared for a long time. Then I did something I hadn't done since I was 10 years old. I walked through the woods behind their property. There was an old stone wall I used to climb as a kid. On the other side, an overgrown greenhouse. That's where I went. And that's where I saw her. An older woman, maybe in her 70s now, sitting in a wicker chair, feeding the koi fish in a shallow pond. Her posture was regal, but her hands, they trembled with age. I stepped out into the clearing. She turned, squinted, and then something shifted in her face. Recognition? No, more like wariness. Daniel Holloway, she said. I froze. You know me. She didn't smile. Just folded her hands and nodded toward the bench. You look just like your mother, she said. The nurse. Margaret, wasn't it? Yes. A pause. And yet, not quite like her. The words lingered like perfume in the air, too intentional. I know who you are, I said, my voice steady. And I know what you did. Her face didn't change, but her grip on the bench tightened. I didn't come here for vengeance, I added. I came for answers. About Lydia. About me. At that, she flinched. Lydia was a scared girl with no one, she whispered. We offered her safety. Security. You offered her silence. She had no options, she said sharply. We gave her one. And what happened to the baby? She looked away. I waited. After a long moment, she said quietly, stillborn. Or so they told us. We never saw a body. Just a certificate. I didn't know whether to believe her. And me? I asked. What was I supposed to be? She looked at me then, really looked. Her eyes were moist. You were going to be Benjamin. Our son. Our redemption. Until Margaret took me. A faint smile tugged at her lips. She was smarter than any of us gave her credit for. She wasn't scared of power. Or money. She made fools of us. I stood up. One more question, I said. Did you know Eleanor? My real mother. She hesitated. Only her name. We weren't allowed contact with the donors. She said it like it tasted rotten. I left her there, by the koi pond, surrounded by the life she'd built on secrets. But as I climbed back over that stone wall, I realized something important. This wasn't about being stolen anymore. It was about being chosen. And someone, a woman who had nothing, had chosen to save me. I spent the next morning in the town's public library. Not because I needed books, I needed silence. And old records. The librarian recognized me. Mrs. Clark. She used to slip me free cookies during summer reading contests. Oh, Daniel, she said, adjusting her glasses. Haven't seen you in years. You back visiting your folks? I almost laughed. Not exactly, I said. Do you have archives? Newspapers from the late 80s? Missing persons? She hesitated, her friendly smile faltering. What are you looking for? A girl. Lydia. 16. Disappeared around 88. Pregnant. Mrs. Clark's expression darkened. She didn't ask why. Just led me to the back room where the microfilm machine sat humming like an old refrigerator. Good luck, she said, and left me alone with decades of silence. It took 3 hours to find it. October 3rd, 1988. Small header, back page. Local girl reported missing from shelter. Lydia R., 16, was last seen leaving the St. Bridget's home for girls late Friday evening. Staff reported she took no belongings with her. Police have classified it as a runaway case. No foul play is suspected at this time. There was no photo. Just a paragraph. She'd vanished, and the world had barely blinked. But I blinked. Hard. Because tucked into that column was a name I recognized. Counseling services provided by Thomas Reeves, volunteer caseworker, have been temporarily suspended pending internal review. Thomas Reeves. That name, it hit like an echo I couldn't place. Until I remembered. A teacher. Freshman year. Psychology. Guest lecturer. Beard, tin hands, smooth talker, always lingering after class. I pulled out my high school yearbook. Found the faculty page. There he was. Thomas Reeves, adjunct counselor. 2005 to 2009. I stared at the photo. Same face. Same eyes. But now, I saw it. The carefully constructed warmth. A mask. I started asking questions. Quietly. At the diner, old classmates remembered him. He was chill, one said. Gave good advice. He gave my sister a ride once, said another. Said he used to work with girls' homes. She said he gave her the creeps. Back at the library, I pulled public records. He had no social media, no current address in town, but a property deed in his name came up under a different county, a cabin just outside of Fairhill, about an hour north. I didn't think. I drove. The cabin was old, wood-chipped and weathered. A shed out back, windows blacked out with newspaper. I parked down the road and walked up through the trees. The door was locked. I circled the house. A window on the side was cracked. I climbed through. Inside was dust. Old furniture. A fireplace. And boxes. Dozens of boxes labeled with years. Inside, files. Notes. Photographs. All of girls. Some alone. Some pregnant. Most too young. And then I found her. Lydia. Her photo was different from what I imagined. She was smiling. Holding her belly. Standing in front of a wall with graffiti. Hope is heavier than fear. My throat tightened. And there, in the same box, was a second photo. A baby. Swaddled. No name. Just a note. Girl, born 1989. Transferred. Transferred? I froze. Was Lydia's baby alive? I kept digging. Under the last layer of papers, there was a worn envelope. Inside, a letter. Dated 1990. Thomas. She asked too many questions. Took off before delivery. I couldn't stop her. If she resurfaces, we lose everything. Use the fallback. Make it clean. It wasn't signed. But the handwriting, I'd seen it before. In the file Grayston gave me. The DeMarcos. My skin crawled. Before I could move, I heard tires on gravel. I ducked. Voices. A car door slammed. A man cursed. Someone entered the cabin. I saw his shape through the doorway. Older. Sturdier now. But I recognized him. Thomas Reeves. He stood in the kitchen, flipping on a lamp. Thought you were smarter, Daniel, he said, without turning. I didn't speak. He sighed. Didn't your mother ever teach you to leave buried things buried? I stepped into view. She taught me to tell the truth, even when it hurts. He looked at me, and something in his eyes hardened. Not fear. Calculation. You've got no proof. I've got this, I said, holding up the letter. And I've got Lydia's name. He stared at me, then laughed. You think anyone's going to care about a 30-year-old ghost? I think someone might. Her daughter, for example. That shut him up. I let that silence grow. You kept files. Photos. You messed up, Thomas. You didn't bury everything. He shifted. You're bluffing. No, I said. I'm burning. Then I walked out past him, past the cabin, into the night. The air was electric. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. Back at the car, I called Eleanor. I think Lydia's daughter is still alive. Eleanor didn't speak for a long time after I told her. Just the soft breath of the line, crackling faintly like she was standing beside a fire, watching something she'd buried come rising out of the flames. Her daughter, she finally whispered. She lived. I think so, I said. And I think I know where she is. I was back in Asheville the next day, sitting with Eleanor in her garden. Her hands were shaking. I handed her the photograph of Lydia, the one from the box. She pressed it to her chest like a lost part of herself had returned. I remember that wall, she murmured. It was behind the shelter. We painted that quote during a grief group meeting. Lydia added the last word. Hope is heavier than fear. She named her, Eleanor added. I remember now. The baby. She called her Maisie. That name stuck in the air like birdsong. Maisie. I spent the next 2 weeks hunting for Maisie. Hospitals. Birth records. Foster agency reports. Most doors stayed shut, sealed, redacted, erased. But then a lead came from an unlikely place, an old friend of Eleanor's who still volunteered at a private counseling center in Charlotte. She remembered a girl, 20-something, who came in last year asking questions about her birth mother. She'd been adopted from a closed case, raised by an older couple who passed when she was a teenager. She said her name was Maisie? I asked. Middle name, the woman replied. She goes by L. L? I repeated. She said it felt like reclaiming something. My heart beat faster. You have an address? The woman hesitated, then wrote it down. She deserves the truth, Daniel. But be careful. Sometimes people carry wounds like glass, sharp, beautiful, and quick to shatter. Her apartment was small, second floor, brick walk-up in Raleigh. A succulent sat on the windowsill. A windcheam on the fire escape. I stood outside her door with the envelope in my hand, Lydia's photo, the shelter note, and a letter Eleanor wrote just days before. I rang the bell. She opened it after the second buzz. Brown eyes. Auburn hair. Something in her cheekbones. It struck me. Hi, I said. Are you Elle? Who's asking? I took a breath. My name is Daniel. I think we're connected. She didn't laugh. She didn't slam the door. Just stared, eyes wide, frozen between fear and something deeper. I don't have money, she said, almost automatically. I'm not here for money. I'm here for the truth. She crossed her arms. You've got 2 minutes. So I gave her the headline version. The shelter. The files. Her mother's name. Lydia Reese, I said gently. She was 16. She didn't run away. She was taken. That cracked something in her. Her lips parted, eyes filling. She didn't leave? No, I said. She fought. They just buried her story. I handed her the photo. Then the letter. She took them, walked inside without inviting me, and left the door open behind her. I stepped in slowly, carefully. The apartment smelled like lavender and old books. A record played faint jazz in the corner. She sat on the couch, reading, crying silently. Finally, she looked up. Who are you? Someone who was supposed to be sold. Someone a woman named Margaret saved. And someone who thinks your mother and mine were braver than we ever knew. She smiled faintly. So what now? I don't know, I said honestly. But you deserve to know where you came from. She nodded. I don't have a family, she said. You do now. That night, she came with me to Asheville. Eleanor met her at the door. They didn't speak for a long time. They just held each other, two strangers bound by a missing woman. I stayed on the porch, watching, listening. And somewhere deep inside me, something shifted. Not healed, not yet, but aligned. For the first time in my life, the question, who am I? Didn't echo back empty. It came back with names, stories, people, blood and choice, fire and hope. And somewhere in the ashes, a new kind of inheritance. 2 weeks after Elle met Eleanor, the three of us began to move like a strange constellation, orbiting grief, orbiting hope, orbiting the impossible question of what came next. It was a Sunday morning when I returned to Margaret's house. I hadn't been back since the funeral. The air was stale, tinged with dust and something faintly floral, a ghost of her presence. I walked into her study, the room she always kept locked unless she was in it. I remembered her sitting at the desk, fingers dancing across paper, always scribbling something when she thought I wasn't watching. The desk drawers were empty, mostly, but taped beneath the bottom panel, just where her old arthritis might have struggled to reach, a compartment. I pried it open with the edge of a spoon. Inside, a leather-bound ledger. No title, no lock. I opened it and stopped breathing. Names, dates, payments, initials scribbled beside each. GG, TR, DM, Grayston, Reeves, DeMarco. Pages upon pages. Children listed by code, then first names scrawled in later entries. Adopted, lost, recovered. Some names were crossed out. Some had question marks. One had a red X. And then I saw mine. Daniel, reclaimed by MH. The word, reclaimed, hit me harder than I expected. She hadn't stolen me. She'd reclaimed me from the very men who had tried to price tag my life. At the back of the ledger was a folded envelope labeled, "If this ever finds light." Inside, a typed letter. Formal. Legal. To whom it may concern. If you're reading this, it means the crimes I feared would never surface have finally clawed their way to air. This ledger contains 30 years of documented illegal adoptions, child laundering, and cover-ups. I was a whistleblower, too scared to blow the whistle out loud. I chose protection over prosecution. But if you're reading this, I choose truth. Take this to the press. Take it to the justice system. Take it to the children still searching. I'm sorry I couldn't do more in my lifetime. Margaret Holloway. I sat back, the weight of the ledger pressing into my lap like a stone baby. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. It didn't feel like peace. It felt like revolution. I took it first to Eleanor, then to Elle. We sat in the garden, the ledger between us like a loaded weapon. They'll try to bury this, Elle said. They always do. Let them try, I replied. She smiled. Not because she believed it would be easy, but because we were finally facing the beast together. We contacted a journalist. Not local. Not soft. Maya Tran, known for uncovering a child welfare ring in Pennsylvania 3 years ago. She listened to our story in silence, then asked to see the ledger. 2 hours later, she said, I've never seen anything this detailed. It's not just evidence. It's a blueprint. We gave her everything. The photos. The names. The letter. Elle gave her Lydia's name. Eleanor gave her every piece of memory she could scrape up from the trauma she'd spent decades trying to silence. And I gave her Margaret's story, not just as the woman who raised me, but as the one who risked everything to break a system that punished girls for being afraid and children for being born. The article dropped 10 days later. The Ledger, a hidden network of adoption for profit and the woman who fought alone. It exploded. National news. Investigations reopened. Families came forward. Children, now adults, began recognizing names. Some cried. Some got angry. Some just stared at the screen, silently validating the ache they'd felt their entire lives. Within a month, subpoenas were issued. Reeves vanished. Grayston was detained at an airport trying to flee to the Caymans. The DeMarcos issued a statement. Denied involvement. Cried for the cameras. But the truth doesn't blink. And Margaret's legacy, hidden beneath floorboards and shame, became the fire that burned down a decades-long lie. Elle and I stood beside Eleanor's hospital bed that spring. She was fading. Her body tired. but her eyes were bright. "You did it," she whispered, voice thin. "You gave them names." "We just followed your map," I said. "No," she smiled. "You wrote the ending." Elle held her hand. "She would have been proud," she said, tears slipping down her cheek. "She always was," Eleanor whispered. "She just didn't know how to say it." We stayed with her all night. And when she passed, sometime near dawn, it was peaceful. No secrets left in her chest. Just truth. After Eleanor passed, we didn't speak for a while. Not because we were avoiding each other, but because some griefs are too intimate to speak through. They need quiet. They need space. They need to echo. Elle moved into Margaret's house a few weeks later. The kitchen that once smelled like peppermint tea and anxiety slowly filled with the scent of ginger and paint thinner. She was sanding the cabinets, making it hers. Not to erase what was, but to soften the sharp edges. I stayed with her most nights. Slept in the guest room. Sometimes we'd meet in the hallway around midnight, both of us unable to sleep, standing barefoot on the hardwood that had once been a hiding place and was now, oddly, a kind of home. The story we'd told, the one Margaret wrote in the shadows, was now being adapted for a documentary. The journalist, Maya, was methodical, honest, and relentless. Every week, she called with updates. Another arrest. Another survivor identified. Another lie dismantled. But as the world dissected our past, Elle and I faced a different kind of reckoning. Who were we now? Not stolen. Not erased. Rewritten. One night, sitting on the porch swing, she asked me, "Do you ever wish you didn't know?" I didn't answer right away. Because yeah, some days, I did. Some days I wanted to go back to the version of myself who thought he was boring, plain, unloved, but at least understood his own edges. Now those edges had shifted. But then she added, "I don't." I looked at her. "I'd rather carry the weight of truth than float on someone else's fantasy." I nodded. "Same." We sat there in silence, the stars blinking like shy truths overhead. "I've been thinking," she said finally, "about changing my name." "To what?" She smiled, small and fierce. "Maisie Eleanor Reese." I grinned. "You sure?" She nodded. Maisie was the part of me they tried to erase. Eleanor was the woman they couldn't break. And Reese, she shrugged, "That's the truth." I liked it. I told her I was thinking of changing mine too. "Daniel Reese Holloway," I said. She smiled. "We're keeping Reese?" "We're keeping Reese." We laughed. The kind of laugh that tastes like healing. The first court hearing for the Reeves case happened in July. I sat in the second row, beside Maisie. Grayston didn't show. His lawyers claimed medical complications. But the judge read Margaret's letter aloud. Every word. Every name. And when he read "reclaimed by MH, I swear I heard the pew beneath me shift. Like Margaret was there. Still holding me. Afterward, outside the courthouse, a girl about my age approached. Her hands were shaking. "Are you?" "Daniel." "I am." She pulled out a crumpled photograph. A baby. Scribbled on the back. "Tessa, 1993. I found my name in the article," she said. "My adoptive parents died last year. I never knew any of this." Maisie stepped forward, took her hand. "You do now." In the months that followed, we held gatherings. Not memorials. Not rallies. Something in between. People brought photos. Notes. Letters they never got to send. We didn't promise healing. We promised space. We promised truth. We promised that no child would ever again disappear into the ledger's black ink without someone remembering their name. 1 year after the article broke, I stood before a room filled with strangers who weren't strangers anymore. We converted Eleanor's garden into a community resource center, counseling, legal aid, reunification support. A plaque at the entrance read, "This place remembers the names they tried to forget." I looked around. Tessa, Joel, Mikey, Ruth, Maisie, and me. We didn't belong to the people who paid for us. We didn't belong to the silence that followed. We belonged to each other, to the names we chose, to the lives we reclaimed, to the truth that survived. The house was quiet the day I found it. Maisie had gone into town for foundation business. I stayed behind to fix the leaky faucet in the laundry room. But the sound that pulled me away wasn't water. It was a soft creak, like a hinge finally giving up a secret. Margaret's sewing room. She always kept it locked. Said it was just for her. As a kid, I pressed my ear to the door, imagining she kept treasure maps or old dresses from a life she'd never talked about. But now, for the first time, it was open. The key must have fallen from its hiding place, wedged above the frame. Or maybe it had always been just within reach, waiting for the moment when I was finally ready. I stepped inside. Just hung like suspended breath. A work table, an antique Singer sewing machine, bolts of fabric along one wall. But it wasn't the sewing that stopped me. It was the shelf of boxes labeled with dates. 1990, my year. In one box, unmarked. I pulled it down. Inside, a small cassette player, 3 tapes, and a folded letter with my name. Daniel. Her handwriting was uneven. Older. Shaky. I unfolded it. If you're reading this, it means the house is yours now. Not just the title, the truth too. There are things I never said out loud because I didn't know how. But if you're still listening, press play. I slid the tape into the player. Her voice crackled through the speaker, a ghost in denim and lavender. Hey baby. It's me. I know, that's a weird way to start, considering everything you've learned. But you'll always be my baby. Even if I didn't give birth to you. Even if I borrowed you from a woman braver than I ever was. I sat down. She kept talking. There were nights when I watched you sleep and thought, he'll hate me someday. For not telling him. But I never stopped loving you. Every scraped knee, every science fair project, every panic attack you never admitted to, I was there. Trying. Failing sometimes. But trying. I kept this room locked because it held the version of me I couldn't let you see, the scared one. The ashamed one. The woman who signed a deal with a devil and spent the rest of her life trying to undo it. She paused, the silence on the tape like breath. You made me proud, Daniel. Not because you exposed them, but because you saw people. Eleanor. Maisie. Every name in that book. You saw what I tried to bury. And when the world wanted to call you lost, you called yourself found. That's the kind of man you are. I sat there for a long time after the tape ended. The room didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt full. Full of the woman who raised me. The woman who saved me. The woman who taught me that love doesn't have to be perfect to be powerful. That night, I placed the letter and the tapes into a small wooden box and locked the sewing room behind me. Not to hide it, but to preserve it. Some truths deserve to live in silence, where they can't be twisted, only remembered. 6 months later, I stood in front of a room filled with strangers again, only this time, they weren't just survivors. They were builders. We had new families now. Chosen families. Threaded not by blood but by stories, by scars, by the names we refused to forget. The last thing I said that night was simple. I used to ask who I was. Now I ask who I want to be. And I choose this. A pause. I choose to remember. I choose to speak. And I choose to love, loudly, imperfectly, and without apology. They stood. All of them. And for the first time, I felt something I had only imagined before. Home.